My name is Brian Annam. I'm with SanDiegoLAN.net. This is going to be our Supreme Commander Forged Alliance tutorial. A few of you asked me to go ahead and do this for you, so here's my attempt. Now, keep in mind that this is a version of Supreme Commander that is copy and run. This isn't the Steam version, nor is it the copy of the CD, so you will have to use our copy to play at our LANs. But go ahead and use this tutorial on your home copy, and you'll be just fine when you come in. Just grab ours and you'll be ready to play. So the first thing I've done, I've gone ahead and downloaded and copied over our version of Supreme Commander, which is right here. And the first thing you want to do when launching Supreme Commander, because it really is a CPU intensive game more than anything, is run this program here, Core Maximizer. What Core Maximizer does is it allows Supreme Commander to utilize more than your standard one core on your computer to keep the game running smoothly between clients. I went ahead and ran that program, and if you see the options here in the task manager, it's all 8 of my cores are selected and enabled for Forged Alliance, not Supreme Commander but Forged Alliance. Close and save. Then I'll go ahead and go to the bin, and I will launch Forged Alliance.exe. When the game will launch, it'll ask you to create a profile, and you want to go in and change your video settings, or you can run in windowed mode. Go ahead and get that out of the way. I'm going to be showing you a quick skirmish. We're going to be going over all 4 of the factions on a custom map made by one of our LAN party enthusiasts that has been very popular. There are 4 main factions in this game, which I'll be going over. The Seraphim, the Cybran, the Aeon, and the UEF. They're all very similar in the way that they build and in the way that they extract resources, but they do have their own playstyle, and I will be going over a bit of that, and you can kind of pick and choose which race you would rather play from this. Now, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to change this to sandbox play, so I can get a feel for it without having to worry about AI trying to kick me off the map while I'm talking. And you can see there's a lot of different functions here in the game options menu. This is the same game options menu you get when you're hosting a LAN game. You can change the mods if we ever use any, the maps, quite a few settings. So the first thing I'm going to go over are the factions and what each faction is and how it's different from the others. Start here at the bottom. Seraphim is the newest of the factions. It came out with the Forged Alliance update, and as such I'm not as familiar with them as I am the other 3. They are a good all-around race or faction. They have very interesting endgame units that are volatile, and when I say volatile in this video, it means that when they explode, if anything is surrounding them, they will also become damaged or destroyed themselves. And you'll actually see that if you build a unit and you look in its notes of the unit and it says volatile, that's what it means. So keep that in mind. Seraphim have pretty well all-around characteristics. There's not one thing good or bad about them. I'm not the huge fan of them because my race is particularly Aeon, but I'll go over them. Cybran is very good early on. They have gunships, which when you refer to a gunship in this game, they would be a unit that could hover in the air while shooting normally bullets or lasers from the air to ground targets. And they don't have to fly off and come back like the bombers do, which makes them take a lot longer to destroy targets and a lot less accurate. They're the only race to have gunships in the early game. All the other races have gunships, but they're either mid-game or very late game. They also have very decent end game. They have their own special bots at the end of the game that you can build that, as all the special bots are, unique to the Cybran. They have the most expensive unit in the game at the very late game, but their strength is in the beginning, when they have that early rush. If you can cripple the enemy with Cybran at the beginning, you'll be at good standings. Aeon, which is the next race here, are highly known for two main features. They have the best air units in the game that are gunships that not only can hover and shoot ground targets, but also are anti-air with anti-air missiles. They can actually target a ground unit and an air unit simultaneously. And they're pseudo-late game units, but they are very effective in numbers. And there's something to be definitely watching out for. If an Aeon player is taking a long time to attack you, get ready to fight some air or some very strong ground targets. We'll go over that. If you're more into a defensive game, if you like to turtle up and you like to defend your allies while they prepare for the late game, then you might like the UEF, this blue race. They're the Terrans, you could say, of Supreme Commander, and they have the best shields in the game, they have the best turrets in the game, and even their experimental unit, which is the biggest, baddest unit in the game of the races, even has a shield and turrets on it. So we'll be going over that. So we'll start here at the bottom, the Seraphim. I'll be doing the general tutorial with the Seraphim just to show you a thing or two. So here we go. We're going to launch. Yes. So it starts you out, and your commander beams into the battlefield. This is your commander. He's a guy inside of a gigantic suit. And you have a large battlefield, which you can zoom out all the way on using your mouse wheel, which is something that a lot of games lack, this type of scope, the size in which you can see. And the first thing you probably noticed were all these dots on the map. There are ones with little green dots, and then ones that have little yellow markings. There are also corresponding markers on the top left here. A green that's labeled mass storage, and a yellow that's energy. Those are your only things in the game that you have to worry about collecting, mass and energy. Well, as you can imagine, they correspond with the map here. The green marks are where you can collect mass, and the yellow marks are where you can collect energy. Now, the yellow marks here are where you can collect energy. However, you can put an energy factory or an energy collector anywhere on the map. You don't have to necessarily use these. These are special areas that are for larger energy collectors in the early game. So, what you want to do when you first enter a battle is try to get out engineers. Now, the commander is an engineer. He can build all the units here at the bottom of the screen, but he alone isn't going to build your base. He can only build this select few buildings at this time unless we upgrade him later, which takes a lot of both mass and energy to do. So what we're going to do is the very first thing, regardless of the race, is you're going to pick land factory. Now this map, what I like to do is I like to find between these two energy yellow markers a spot right up against them, so it's just touching both, and I'll click, and that will have my commander to start building this land factory. Now, as the name suggests, it's a factory that builds land units. Now, the reason why we're building a land factory as opposed to a naval or air factory is that if you take a look at the building costs, a land factory is going to cost you 240 mass and 2100 energy. Now, if you take a look at the air factory, it actually costs a little bit less on this faction, but not on all. And the naval factory costs a lot more mass, but less energy. The LAN factory is going to be your early on staple for most of your factions, and that's your first build. Now, even when the factory is building, you can queue up units to be built inside of it. And if you notice, now that neither my commander nor my LAN factory are busy, they're idle, you'll have the idle worker bar up here. This showing me that my commander's idle with this here, and it'll have an idle factory as well. You almost never want to have idle workers or factories, because that means you could be producing when you're not. Now, while my factory was building, I'll go ahead and queue up 5 or 6 engineers. Now, you can queue up 5 units at a time by holding down the shift key. And the shift key is going to be very important in this tutorial, and I'll show you why. So as you can see, the units are building there in the center, and we'll let them do that. Well, while the engineers are building, I'm going to have my commander start gaining more resources. We're going to go ahead and snag the mass extractor from below here, and we're going to place it on a mass extractor point. This little engineer bot is also going to do that. Now, the reason why I'm starting with mass extracting as opposed to building the power plants is because mass is much more difficult to come by. Namely because it can only be secured on these green dots. Now, I'm going to have 2 mass extractors going up here shortly. I might as well start on energy. Now, these little tier 1 low tier engineers can have 2 types of power plants that they can build. A standard power generator, which is the staple of your tier 1 power, will actually gain 20 energy per second. And we can go ahead and attach it to the LAN factory as such. You'll also have a secondary power plant that the tier 1 bots can build, which is called a hydrocarbon power plant. Now, these names are the same for all 4 factions. So down here, the hydrocarbon power plant, and it's the larger one I mentioned before. You can't place it anywhere except for these hydrocarbon spots. So we'll go ahead and have him do that. And we will have this bot and this bot. By holding shift, we select more than one. And while still holding shift, I'm going to right click on this worker, and he is now the boss of them. Anything he does, they will help. I'll go ahead and with my commander, I'm going to hold down shift, and just like those bots there, I will have him build more mass extractors all the way around my base. Your build queue will normally be LAN factory, mass extractor, power generator, and then mass extractor, power generator, mass extractor, power generator, back and forth, back and forth. You want to have a basically equal amount of both. And as you can see, I haven't dropped down less than 0 on either of my bars up here, which means I'm doing well. But I will be producing more than either of those will allow me to do soon enough. Now you can see I have 4 idle engineers sitting up here. I'm going to go ahead and highlight those. Choose one to be the boss of them. If I hold down shift, I can see which one I designated earlier. Go ahead and right click on him, and I'll have him build another hydrocarbon plant right here. Now, as you heard me say before, I went ahead and picked a spot directly between these 2 hydrocarbon yellow spots for my LAN factory to go. And it's very important that you learn this early on. It's called an adjacency bonus. And what an adjacency bonus does is, in theory, anything that produces either energy or mass leaks. And it's not as good as it could be if it didn't. So by placing your factories next to things that produce energy or mass, it'll actually use that leaking amount as income for its own building material. So when I build energy plants or power generators, I stick them right next to my factories. If I were to surround this factory with these power generators, I could potentially have 25% of all energy costs cut from this particular factory. But seeing as we're more than enough energy, and we've got more than enough mass here, we'll go ahead and go over some early units. So again, move these guys out of the way. Now if you find you have a lot of engineers, you can actually have one or two of them helping your factory by clicking on an engineer and right-clicking on a factory, and that will assist the factory in building faster. So early on, we've got some pretty terrible units, I have to admit. The race that I'm currently playing here has got a scout, a medium tank, a mobile anti-air, which could be very important if you're against a race that has early on air units, and a mobile light artillery. We'll go over each of those. Now, as I'm building these first units, I can go ahead and have my commander continue. If I zoom out here, I see there's lots more mass spots I can take. So I'll go ahead and click on mass extractor down here at the bottom, hold down my shift key, and tell him to build them all. As such. Don't want to run out of mass. And I can have my boss engineer here, hold down shift, and I can see which one it is. Do the same thing with the hydrocarbon plants. I'll start here, and I will go click, 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 holding down shift all the while, click, click, and I'll have him come back here when he's done. Same thing with the commander. Alright, so we've got a few units here. The medium tank does exactly what it sounds like. It's not as heavy as a heavy tank, and heavier than the light tanks in the game. It's a decent attacking tank and a good defensive unit. And the medium tanks, through the different races, are going to perform about the same. They have very little shields at the beginning, because this is only tier 1, and a decent offense. The combat scout is a bipedal scout that is very fast. You can have him go and scout the enemy base, and he'll run there pretty quickly. I can have him do a quick scout run and patrol, and he'll get there, and I'll be able to see what the enemy is gearing up for. In StarCraft, you would actually use one of your engineers to do that. We've got scouts for that in this game. Then you've got your anti-air gun. Now this guy is a walking bot that will shoot air and air alone. So you want to position him preferably behind your medium tanks if they're in a platoon together, or possibly intermix them within your buildings, maybe in here, somewhere where they won't get in the way though, because sometimes they don't move when you want to build something some places, or they get stuck. And then lastly we've got artillery, which I'll go ahead and build one. And he'll assist. You can see the engineers and the commanders are building quite successfully. Here's the tier 1 light artillery, and the light artillery has a range. This is its maximum firing range here, much larger than the maximum range of the medium tanks. And they will be even behind. They'll either, if you were going to form a line, you would either put them right behind the medium, or even behind the anti-air, but probably right behind the medium tanks, or the light tanks, depending on your race. We can now talk about tank movement and formation. You can have your units move by just highlighting them and then right-clicking somewhere. But it's a little bit more efficient and more effective if you hold down your right click. You can actually have them form up in a formation as such, and you can have them point in a direction once they arrive. Now while I'm holding down the right click, if I clicked with my left mouse button, they'll actually change their formation. If there was maybe 16 or more of units, you would actually see this turn from a block to a more of a square or a rectangle. And what the game will do is they'll automatically put the shielded units towards the center, so that they can broadcast their shield over the entire group. They'll put the anti-air in the back and the ground fighting tanks in the front. It's very smart. But for right now, with only these 3 tanks, the game will only do this formation here. And as you can see, they're continuing to build their queue, and I can go ahead and forget about units once they're queued up, because I know that once these guys are done, my status indicator up here on the top right will finish. We're going to go ahead and move on to air units now, so I will take a couple of these guys and make a air factory. Now you might notice, as I mentioned before, that you can place your power generation next to your LAN factory, but you might be asking, why am I not putting my factories next to these mass extractors? And you'd be right in thinking that, yes, you would get a boost, and that things would cost less mass to build if they were sapping the extra that these mass extractors have. However, I will show you a much better use for your mass extractors here in just a moment. And my little scout down here is patrolling the enemy base. Nothing to worry about, there's no AIs anywhere. Okay. So as I said before, you can actually start building when the buildings aren't even done yet. So I'm going to have him build an engineer. And we've got some basic air units. You've got your air scout, which is the air version of the land scout. You've got an interceptor, which is an air-to-air fighter. You've got an attack bomber, which is different from a gunship, whereas the attack bomber can't hover. It has to fly over to target and then drop a bomb, fly back around, drop another bomb. Not super efficient. You have to have a lot of them to kill anything, and they don't do a hell heck of a lot of damage. I'll go ahead and have this engineer assist the building process of this factory. The air scout is great early on because it has a very large area that it can see units, as well as it has a large area for viewing, and it's very fast. It can be shot down sort of easily, so you might want to have 2 or 3 of them in a squadron. And you can even use them for perimeter on your own base, like this. So I've clicked, hold down shift, click, click, and then I hover over my original spot, and you see my cursor changes. Right click one last time with the shift key still held down, and that will initiate a patrol. And he'll just keep doing that until the end of the game. The tier 1 interceptor, usually I'll build 3 or 4 of these per section of base. So I'll have 3 or 4 of them here, I'll have 3 or 4 of them here, and I'll have 3 or 4 of them sort of in this area. And that way, if the enemy tries to fly a whole bunch of bombers into my base, I'll have both an early warning system, and I'll already have interceptors there. Now here's the bomber. The bomber for tier 1 is the same pretty much throughout all the races. All you have to do is right click on an enemy base, or if there's an area in which you want to bomb, you just press A and you click with your left mouse button. And he will bomb that specific area. So we've got our idle engineer here telling me that, hey, we're done. What do you want us to do next? This is a very important thing that we have to talk about here, and that is upgrades. Now, many buildings in this game can be upgraded, including, but not limited to, the mass extractors, which get us the mass here, as well as any factories, unit building structures. And the tiers go from 1 all the way up to Tech 3. So we'll go ahead and upgrade our land factory, we'll go ahead and upgrade our air factory, and we'll go ahead and upgrade one of these mass extractors. Now the mass extractors, as well as anything going from one tier up to the next, cost a lot of both mass and energy. I'm making almost 0 extra mass now, even with all of these green spots taken. What I will do to speed up the process is I'll grab the leader of this group here, and after the mass extractor has already started upgrading, you can do this. Grab him, right click on the mass extractor, and you'll notice he'll start actually helping it upgrade faster. Now, I mentioned the order in which I did that because if I had him help one of these units here and then tried to upgrade it, then he would simply heal the unit, not help it upgrade. So that's very important, the order of which you upgrade, then assist. And all of his little worker bees will assist in this, and it'll go much faster, as you can see. The air factory is halfway upgraded, as the land factory is 75% done. Now, once your mass extractors in your entire base are tier 2, or as they are becoming tier 2, whichever you prefer, you're going to want to surround them. As we talked about, there is an adjacency bonus with the mass extractors, and they're not your standard adjacency bonus. As I was saying before, they leak. That's the thing. They're not as efficient as they could be. So in order to stop them from that, what you will use is this down here. It's called mass storage. You could surround these spots with energy storage and these spots with mass storage, and they will get a 25% increase in productivity. It's immense. If you don't do it, you are really stubbing your toe against players that do. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll do mass storage on every flat side it has. And we'll take a look here. We're making +6 on a tier 2 mass extractor. The tier 1s only give us +2. Now we'll let them build as we do because they are queued up, and they will let us know when they're finished. Our ACU here, our commander, is finished, he says. So we'll go ahead and have him assist the land factory. But before that, we're going to go over defensive structures of the early game. Now normally you might want to do this before you start upgrading while you still have some early economy. Down here in the commander's build area, we have point defenses. Now a point defense is a structure which will fire on ground targets and ground targets alone. We also have anti-air, which is the same idea, but it will only fire on air structures. There are also torpedo launchers, as well as wall sections. Now wall sections have no bearing in late game. Most larger units that you can build later on can actually just walk over them. However, if you want to cordon off an area early on with walls to help slow down an enemy movement, you can do that. You don't really see it in competition play because they're not really all that useful. So while he's building this, we can see our idle engineer indicator up here is activated, so we'll go ahead and click on that to see. Of course, it's them. And they now have 4 mass storage spots around our mass extractor, and it's gone from +6, as you remember, to +9 in mass production. So a 25% increase indeed. So what I'm going to be doing is a base-wide upgrade of our mass extractors to tier 2 and surrounding them. Now this is a very important part. If you've never played Supreme Commander, you won't have any of these, what they're called, templates. What a template is it allows you to build something like this here with 1 or 2 clicks. The way that you build a template is you select the units that you want to have built the same way each time. So I want 4 mass extractors exactly this far apart with a click of a button. So I highlight them by double clicking on them, make sure nothing else is highlighted, and right down here at the bottom of my screen there's this little button that says, when I hover over it, Save Template. We're going to hit that. Doesn't look like anything happened, but trust me, it has. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to upgrade this mass extractor over here. So I click on it, I click on the upgrade icon on the bottom, and you can see it stopped production and it's now upgrading, indicated by the bar at the bottom. And I'll go ahead and highlight Mr. Boss Engineer here, have him assist in the upgrade. Now when he's done with that, I'm going to want to surround that new Tech 2 mass extractor with 4 mass storages just like this one. We now have these tier icons at the bottom that we had before. Now we have a new one, templates. And if we click on that, we can see the template we saved prior, and look at that, it's exactly what we have up here. So if I hold down shift and I click, he will first help to upgrade this extractor and then automatically build these 4 extractors before telling me he's finished up here on the right. Saves a lot of clicks in the late game, as you can imagine, because I'm going to be doing the same template this many times. So now that we've got a little point defense, we've got some tanks, we now have an upgraded LAN factory. We'll go ahead and have our commander assist in that. Now I did mention early warning systems, and the last thing you want is an enemy sneaking around and into your base from a side that you weren't expecting. You've got all these turrets here, you've got these units, and then they come in the top there. There are radar in the game. Now the commander can't build it because he has a very limited selection of building tools. However, engineers of any class or type can build a radar stand. As soon as I can find it. Aha! Radar system. Now radar does take energy. So you can do one of two things. I can either put it here, or I can put it here or here, or I can place it here next to my energy hydrocarbon power plant, and it'll actually cost less to operate. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll have my commander assist it, and then I'll have him go back to helping out the factory, and I'll have him going back to help the factory after he's done. And we'll go ahead and upgrade this LAN factory one more time. Now, you'll notice that they are tiered building queues on the factory. You can have a tier 2 or a tier 3 factory build tier 2, 1, or 3 tech units as long as it has reached that tech requirement. So you can go back and build the lower units if you so wish. Some of the tier 2 units are actually preferable over some of the tier 3 units, believe it or not, because they're so much cheaper. We'll go over a little bit of the tech 2. We've got a basic assault bot, which is going to be ground to ground. Cannot hover over water, can only walk on ground. You've got a hover tank for the Seraphim, and if you take a close look, each one of these units has a background, and the background indicates whether or not it can walk on just land, or if it can hover over both land and sea. You can see the hover tank has a little blue underneath it, as does the mobile anti-air cannon. So you could have those either attack an enemy base over water in lieu of using aircraft or boat or ship, or defend using a water route. They also have a mobile anti-air cannon that can go over sea or land. It's tier 2, and a mobile missile launcher. The mobile missile launcher shoots missiles from afar, similar to the tier 1's artillery. So we'll have a much larger shooting area. We're not going to worry about building those at this time because we are going to move on. We can go ahead and upgrade the LAN factory as well while we're at it. Oh, and these guys are done, so I'm going to go ahead and upgrade this next mass extractor here. I'm going to go ahead and have my idle engineer holding down shift, right click, going to templates while shift is still held down, and place all 4 mass storage. See if we can speed up time a little bit here. Well, look at that. We're actually in the negatives on energy there for a moment. That was interesting. The upgrades, as I mentioned, are very expensive, going from tier 2 to tier 3 or tier 1 to tier 2. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what the tier 3 is. And the tier 3 is next to the highest tier in the game. The land factory can build up to tier 3, as well as the naval and air factory can build up to tier 3. Now, you might be thinking, oh cool, what's the biggest and baddest tier 3 you can build? And to be honest, it's the engineer. The tier 3 engineer can build anything a tier 2 engineer can build, anything a tier 1 engineer can build. But they can also build experimental units, which we'll be going over here shortly. Go ahead and have him build these. So here is the Tech 3 engineer for the Seraphim. And they can build anything a tier 2 can build, and I'll show you a couple tier 2 buildings I want to harp on. Now, as we mentioned, things can upgrade, such as the mass extractors and the land factories. So can the radar systems. Right now this radar dish would only show me things coming in this far. If I upgrade it, it'll actually show me things a lot further. And see, now I have the whole base. And if I upgrade it once again to tier 3, go ahead and upgrade and install the facilities on these extractors. Alright, so Tech 3 actually can see the whole map on this map. This is a rather small map, to be honest. So, the Tier 2 engineer can build a much stronger point defense, which is the ground attack. And it's actually the strongest point defense of this race, and all the other races except for UEF, which actually have a tier 3 point defense. As I said, they are the defensive race. The tier 2 can build a missile defense, which would defend you against tactical missiles from that missile unit that I showed you earlier, and as well as tier 2 missile platforms. Now, a tier 2 missile platform is not a nuke, it's a tactical missile. They're medium range and they do medium damage. You'd have to have quite a few of them to actually destroy anything, and they're not all that accurate. But missile defense is very important around your buildings. You want to have maybe 1 or 2. And with missiles, even nukes, if you put one here and the guy who is attacking you is aiming here, and the missile flies through this path, the missile defense system here, even though it will only reach this far, will catch it. If you put one here and he shoots here, it won't. So keep that in mind. You want to have it in the path of the missile, not where you're expecting it to land, necessarily. The Tier 2 anti-air is decent. It's much better than the Tier 1, obviously. They also have things called air staging beacons, or air staging platforms, which will allow your units to actually dock there and refuel. And you can see these guys that were out of fuel will actually dock there, and not all that important, to be honest. The more important things that a Tier 2 engineer can build are impressive. Let's take a look here. Here's a shield generator, and the shield generator will actually shield anything within the bubble. So you might want to put one here, connected to this power generator, like this, or have it up here protecting your shield, or protecting your turrets and your tanks. The Tier 2 shields aren't all that great, to be honest. You might want to queue early on, but to be honest, you want to try to get to the Tier 3 shields as fast as you can. They do, however, have a decent Tier 2 power generator. There we are. So this is the Tier 2 power generator. And as the Tier 1 power generator produces 20 power per second, the Tier 2 is going to create more like 500 power per second. So here's the tier 2 power generator producing 500 power per second, and I've connected it directly to this air staging beacon just so that anytime the air staging beacon uses energy, it'll actually snag some of the extra energy off this power generator. Not really necessary for the air staging, as it doesn't take all that much. This is the Tech 3, and as you can see, the Tech 3 power generator takes a lot longer to build, but gives you 2,500 energy, and you can see my energy woes are gone. Now you can get any of these energy producing plants shown here to produce 25% more if you want to surround them with energy storage. Not really all that required, to be honest, because it's so easy to just build a new energy factory or energy plant. So I'll go ahead and upgrade the rest of my mass extractors here. Just go ahead and upgrade them all. I'll go ahead and build the mass storage around them all. There we go. So all of my mass extractors are now tier 2, and eventually I'll go ahead and make them tier 3. Now, you don't want to upgrade too many at a time, especially if you don't have this much map to work with, because when they're upgrading, they're not giving you any more mass, which is a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and upgrade just a handful of them at a time. I'm not going to upgrade all of them though. And it would have been a little bit better if I had these here finished before I upgraded these, because they'll make 25% more per unit. Now I'm going to show you a defensive structure. So I'll go ahead and grab my highest tier engineer, which happens to be Tech 3, and I'll go ahead and have a bunch of them help him, including my commander, and I'll go ahead and have him build let's see here, a point defense. Now point defense is a Tech 2, and it'll attack ground targets. And I'll go ahead and I'll put a shield around this. So we'll go ahead and select tier 3. We'll go ahead and put a shield. There we go, heavy shield generator. We'll go ahead and put it right up on my power generator there, and watch how fast this builds with all these engineers helping out. Done. Look at that. So now anything that tries to shoot up into this protected bubble will be intercepted by the shield. Now the shield does have a limited amount of power, and it does help by having it attached to the power generator. It's doing 406 negative on my energy, as you can see there on the bottom left, but it's definitely worth it. Shields are a must, and you want to have a couple in each one of your little bases here. I'll go ahead and upgrade these to tier 3 all at once. There we go. So these are all upgraded to tier 3 now. These are all still tier 2, these are all still tier 2, and these are being upgraded to tier 3. So I'll go ahead and show you an experimental unit. Now you've seen these. You've got Tech 1, tier 2, Tech 3, and then here's our experimentals tab. Now the experimentals tab can only be accessed using the engineer, the tier 3 engineer. And this race has 3 experimental units. They have an experimental missile launcher, which is a nuke firing device that fires actually 2 nukes at once, so that you can't neutralize it quite as easily as you could a single nuke. They have an experimental bomber, and I'll tell you the problem with the experimental bomber in this race is that the maps we play on aren't really that big. They're like 10 kilometers squared, and what will happen was the bomber will start to go, he'll try to make a bombing run, and he'll hit the side of one of these hills, and you have to change course. And by the time he whips around to change course, he misses his target, and has to try to fly all the way outside the map, come back in, try again, and the enemy anti-air has already taken a huge chunk out of his life. So, unless you're playing on a map that's enormous, the Seraphim Experimental Bomber, probably not the experimental you want to build. This, however, in the third unit, is the Experimental Assault Bot. And we'll go ahead and put one out here. Any experimental is going to take a colossus amount of energy and mass. So you can see my energy, which I was fine on earlier, is down to negative 1238. I can go ahead and turn off this shield. Turned off the shield there, brought that down to only negative 832, so it's building a little bit faster, but I could definitely use more energy. Go ahead and build the rest of my mass extractors here. So now he's done. And he'll run and he'll attack and he has a large main cannon. One main thing that you have to remember with this is volatile, and if you remember what I said about volatile units is that they explode. Now he doesn't just explode. He actually launches a pseudo-nuclear explosion and continues a radiation effect of lightning around his corpse for the next several minutes. So any unit caught in that area will actually be destroyed, and that's even with the commander. Now the Seraphim commander has the same effect. He goes nuclear, and then he has a lightning effect over his corpse for the next several minutes, and that's the only race where its volatile units actually have this lightning effect. And it's very interesting because when you're using the experimental assault bot, you actually want to march it inside of the enemy's defenses if you expect that it's going to be destroyed. And you'll actually kamikaze it inside their base, and that lightning effect will take out a large number of units if the enemy commander is not paying attention to get them out of the way of the lightning. Now that we have the experimental finished, we can go ahead and turn the shields back on, just to make sure we're defended. If it was me, I'd go ahead and build some more power, etc. So that's your basic building tutorial. So to recap, LAN factory, mass power, mass power. You want to upgrade all of your mass extractors. They all need to be surrounded by mass storage. If they're a Tech 2 or higher mass extractor, don't surround your Tech 1 mass extractors with mass storage. It actually doesn't do anything. Found that out. So we'll go ahead and end our Seraphim game, as we've already gotten to our final unit here. F10, and end game. And I'll be showing you the other units here in the next couple of minutes. So we'll go on with the next unit, Cybran. What I'm going to go ahead and do is turn off, so I don't need to make energy or mass. Cybran. Alright, so there's my Cybran commander. It launches in. I'll go ahead and have the same build queue. I'll have a LAN factory. I'll hold down shift and I'll click mass extractor, power generator, mass extractor, mass extractor, power generator, power generator, power generator, mass extractor, power generator, power generator, power generator. So that's your basic build start. Just holding down the shift. Now the commander will just build and build and build until he's done. Go ahead and build a bunch of engineers, 5 or 6. And because I don't actually need to build mass or energy, I'll just go ahead and have the commander help build the Now, recall what I said, that the Cybran are the early rush winners. They have a light assault bot, which actually is a ground attack unit and is very fast to build and is actually quite the speedy little guy. They have an assault bot, which is a little bit stronger, and it can actually self-repair itself. It has a mobile anti-air gun and a mobile light artillery just like the other units. These are your light attack bots. They're very quick to build, especially the smaller one here. But where they really strive is their early air. So we'll go ahead and build an air factory. Them assist. Now the early air unit that I'm mentioning is the gunship. Now we didn't have a chance to talk about the gunship in the previous race, but here's the light gunship, and it can actually hover and fire while hovering. And you can't really see it here because I don't have any enemies, but 20 or 30 of these early on before the enemy has a chance to get to Tech 2 or hit him while he's upgrading to Tier 2 so that his energy and mass are at a low state and he'll have a hard time fighting you off. He can't build any units while he's upgrading to Tier 2. So this light gunship is solely on the Cybran side of this game for Tier 1. We'll go ahead and upgrade both of these to Tier 2. 3. And I'll show you all their units. Alright, so the air units for the Cybran are very similar later on as the other races. You've got fighters, you've got fighter bombers, which can actually do anti-air and ground bombing. You've got a torpedo bomber that's only good against water targets. You've got a Tier 2 gunship, which is standard. That's normally the best gunship that you want to use mid-game. It's going to be a heck of a lot stronger than this little Tier 1 bomber. As you can see, it's a lot larger than him. And you also have a heavy gunship, which is going to be for Tier 3. But as you can see, it takes a lot longer to build than the one or the two. And a Tier 3 is going to outclass a 1 or a 2, even if they're fighting both against a Tier 3. It'll probably win. They're just that much stronger per tier. At Tier 3, for heavy airships, we've got a strategic bomber, which actually shoots like a mini EMP grenade that does a lot of damage over a wide area. You want to use that against buildings, not so much units that can walk away because they can dodge. You've got an air superiority fighter, which is strictly anti-air, and then a spy plane, which is similar to our scout plane from before, but it's got a very large area that it can see, as well as it's very fast, so it's really hard to shoot down. They are expensive though. With our land units, again, we have the engineering class. We've got Tier 3 assault bots, and as I mentioned, the Cybran are okay at the middle, but their really highlights are the beginning and their end game, and they have a unit that's called the Brick. And the Brick is known for being able to just walk through enemy defenses, and I'll show you a Brick here. This little happy fellow is the Brick. And the Brick has turrets on all sides, but what it's really known for is it's got 9,000 HP. Now let me put that into perspective for you. This Tier 3 heavy gunship only has 5,900. And this thing takes forever to kill. It's got fairly large alpha damage as well, and it can shoot fairly rapidly. So this, in droves, these things will dominate a defense, even if it's highly shielded. I'll go ahead and show you some experimental units of the Seraphim. Go ahead and have them assist this guy here, and click over to experimental. So we've got a rapid fire artillery, which, as it sounds, it actually fires long range lobs of cannon fire all the way across the map, regardless of where you are. You can't, there's no outer range of this. What the circle you're seeing on the map here is actually its inner range where it can't shoot. So this thing will shoot all across any map. You have what's called the experimental spider bot, and this is going to be very similar to the robot from the previous game we saw. And they are all helping him build it. Now I am moving the camera by holding down the space bar and moving my mouse around. It allows you to adjust your viewpoint, but when you let go of the space bar, it actually snaps back to where you were. So here's the experimental Monkey Lord Spider Bot, and it will, with its large laser, attack and destroy pretty much any ground target. Now, it and that large walker bot I showed you on the previous race are probably about equal on alpha damage. They both just explode in a volatile manner. However, this one does not explode quite as large. It's also cheaper to make, and it doesn't have as much HP, if I recall. Both units are weak on anti-air. This has at least some anti-air, whereas the walker bot on the previous did not. So both of them would be susceptible to the gunships. Now, when I said late game, this isn't what I'm talking about. Their true late game comes from some larger spider bots. This here is a very similar spider bot that instead of just one laser cannon on it, it actually has 4. But as such, it's about twice as much to build as far as cost goes, and it has over twice as much HP. This has got 110,000 HP. This has got 4,500. Excuse me, 45,000 HP. And one other unit that is interesting that they have that no other race has is the experimental gunship. This is an air unit that, just like the other gunships in the game, can hover and fire lasers or bullets down from the sky, but as you can see, it is gigantic. It is much stronger than any other gunship in the game. However, it is a fairly slow-moving air target and can actually be susceptible to these Tech 3 gunships if you have enough of them. You can even send a whole bunch of the Tech 2 and Tech 1s against it to lesser effect. So that's the Cybran. Their strengths being the early game with their light assault bots and especially their light gunships, and their very late game with their experimental Megabot, their experimental Spider Bot, and their experimental large gunship called the Soul Ripper. And we'll show you a little bit of the next race here. Aeon. Aeon is the race I commonly choose because I am a fan of the air style of play, and I'll show you why that's important for them. I'll pop out my LAN factory right away, air factory, because I have no resources to worry about per se. Game speed. Okay, now that we've got our factories upgraded to Tier 3, I'll go ahead and show you a little bit of why the Aeon are my favorite. They have the potential to have the best resources in the game as far as allocation. The commander here, as the same as all the other commanders, can not only build what the units shown down here are, but as I mentioned before, he is an upgradable unit. Down here on the bottom, you'll have this bottom button that says Enhancements. And there are 3 tiers of enhancement. You've got the right arm, the back plate, and the left arm are all upgradable on this unit. Now you can only have 1 item per plate, so you want to be picky. What I choose are the sensor enhancements. On the back plate, I choose the resource allocation, which has actually 2 levels, and this is the only commander that can actually have 2 levels of resource allocation. Both all 4 of the different races commanders can actually do 1 resource allocation, whereas the Aeon commander here can actually do 2. And what the resource allocation does was bring, right now my commander is doing 50 plus mass every second and 2,000 plus energy. If I upgrade him, he'll get actually 68 plus mass, and if I upgrade him one more time, that jumps way up, and I will show you that here. Now he's making 68. Now he's making 86 mass. Just by being on the field, I'm getting 86 mass from this character. And that's something only the Aeon can do. So we'll go ahead and make some Tier 3 engineers, and I'll show you where this gets fun. Alrighty, so there are some special units that the Aeon can do, that only the Aeon can do, and one such unit is here in the Air Factory in Tier 3 called the Anti-Air Gunship. Now, as I mentioned, the Anti-Air Gunship is the only gunship that excels at both ground targeting and air targeting. The other Tier 3 gunships can do some anti-air, yes, but this is the only gunship that can stay on station and hover and shoot missiles to take down other air targets. Very important that you remember this unit. The Aeon also have a decent shield that you can build for Tier 3. It covers a decent amount of area, not as much as the UEF, and I forgot to mention this about the Cybran. The Cybran only have Tier 2 shields. However, they're the only race that you can upgrade their Tier 2 shields 2 or 3 or 4 times, so they become larger and larger and grow to look like a Tier 3 shield. But you won't find them in Tier 3 shields on the Cybran. You'll only find them in Tier 2 style. And then you'll have to manually upgrade them. Kind of a pain in the butt. So this is the Tier 3 shield. I've shown you upgrading the commander, and I'll show you some of the experimental units of the Aeon. Now, as I mentioned, their technology is based on the Seraphim technology, so they too have an experimental walker. However, their experimental walker is reminiscent of the Iron Giant from the 1999 animated film with Vin Diesel. It has a large eye or chest laser, and it can actually tractor beam units into its hand and crush them to death without actually having to get through their shields. So if you're coming across a Colossus, I would not suggest having ground units trying to attack it. I would send gunships against it, because he can simply suck up ground units and destroy them in his palm. So here's the Colossus in its finished form. It's got nearly 100,000 HP. It can regenerate HP if it gets hurt. It does not have any anti-air, so his real weakness are the gunships. Not so much the bombers, because by the time the bomb falls, he's over here. He's not all that fast, and keep in mind I do have the game speed turned up. That's why he's walking around like a madman. A couple of the things that the Aeon have that the other races don't. Well, all the races have heavy artillery, which is a Tier 3, and the heavy artillery has a minimum distance of this distance, and a maximum distance of well beyond the size of this map. So it's very important that you shield these, because as soon as you build one, it is something that the enemy is going to try to bomb the heck out of. So you want to build it inside a shield, you want to surround it with anti-air, whatever you can do to protect your artillery. This is the first high-end artillery you're going to see in the game. It's a tier 3 artillery. There's also experimental artillery that the UEF and the Cybran have experimental artillery. The Aeon have 2 tier 3 artillery. They have this accurate slow-firing artillery that I'm building. They also have what's called the rapid-fire artillery cannon, which is this item here that I'm going to place. And it's not as accurate, however, it does airburst above a target and then rain down separate shells or projectiles as it falls, creating sort of an area effect, but shotgun spread. So it's pretty interesting. Both of them cost and take forever to build. You can see I've got unlimited resources, and it's still draining me into the negatives. I've got the game on +10 speed, and it's taking quite some time to build. You want to have a good defense, and you want to have all of your extractors upgraded to Tech 3, surrounded by mass storage, and you want to have a few Tech 3 power generators to keep your power from dipping into the negatives before even attempting to build either an experimental unit or a large artillery piece or nuke. Go ahead and talk about nukes a little bit. There are some notes about nukes. A nuclear device can be found in the Tech 3 building queue under Strategic Missile Launcher. And it doesn't take that long to build, to be quite honest. It really doesn't. The Tech 3 Missile Launcher is one of the more powerful units in the game, and the thing I have to note about it is the reason why the launcher itself doesn't take very long is that you actually have to build missiles within it similar to a factory. You don't have to upgrade it or anything like that, but it does take forever for a missile to actually build up and be ready to fire. So what I do is I have a whole bunch of engineers ready to assist it in building a nuke, and there they go, they're assisting it build a nuke. Now this is +10 with unlimited resources, so it's actually building rather quickly, but it's taking 4,500 energy and 40 mass just to build this one missile. Now before you even think about building a nuke, presume that the enemy's thought about building a nuke. And down at the bottom of the screen we got strategic missile launchers, but we also have strategic missile defense, which is this unit here. And you can see the area that it'll defend is this area, but as you recall, I mentioned, on its way from the enemy base to yours, anytime if it crosses over the circle, the defensive structure will stop it, unless they send 2 or 3. So I can go ahead and build one of these as well. Now this will build anti-nukes faster than this will build a nuke, so you've got that going for you. If indeed you think you're going to be nuked, go ahead and build one of these. Have a few engineers on hand to help it build anti-nukes, and then just leave it alone. It'll do its own thing as long as the missile passes over the circle trajectory. Oh good, so we've got our artillery station up, and it'll actually attack anywhere that I tell it to. There it goes. And it does quite a bit of damage. Usually one of these won't break through a defensive grid of a number of shields overlapping. You'd have to have 2 or 3 of them, to be honest. So unless you're going to go artillery heavy with maybe a couple artillery or a few different types of artillery, you might want to think about using them as support of an attacking force, like you'll have them shoot in front of your Colossus to help your Colossus take down shields, that type of thing. You might want to use it to take down enemy nuke launchers. If the person that was using the nuke wasn't smart enough to cover his nuke launcher with shields or anti-air. One other experimental unit that I doubt you'll ever see in a game is called the Experimental Resource Generator. We'll go over that last. I'll show you the experimental aircraft carrier that you probably will see in a game. If you ever seen Independence Day, this machine will be familiar to you. It launches a large energy-based weapon through the center of the donut and will destroy anything underneath it. However, it is one of the slowest air units in the game, and because of that, it's very susceptible to anti-air, ground, and aerial anti-air units such as the Interceptor or the anti-air gunship, this guy here. He has 4,600 HP, which is only as half as the Colossus. However, if you're smart, you can actually use this to land on an enemy base or an enemy commander, and the commander will go off like a nuke because he's been destroyed, because all commanders are volatile. So there it is, and as I mentioned, it is rather easy to hit because he's not all that quick. But you can have him assist a Colossus, and they will go on a rampage together. Now, one cool thing about the flying saucer is you can actually build units out of it. So it's actually building units inside of itself right now, and then I can click this deploy button, and I'll give you a demonstration. He'll go over an enemy base. Oh no, I've got a bad guy over my base, and oh boy, he's deploying air units from inside of himself. And you can have it hold over like 100 units. So you definitely don't want to see that flying over your base and then 100 units stream out of it. Just don't let it get shot down while the units are still inside of it, because you'll lose them all. So I'll show you the resource allocation experimental here. Now this cost 250,200 mass and 7,506,000 energy. If you build this unit, prepare to have, for the rest of the game, your fellow teammates protecting you. It will take all of your resources, all of your mass, all of your energy, all of your engineers. Your commander should be helping build this thing. If you decide to build this, it is a commitment. It's all or nothing. It takes the better part of an hour on a real game to finish. But if you manage to pull it off, this will never run out of resources. It will create an unlimited amount of mass and an unlimited amount of energy throughout the rest of the game unless it's destroyed. So what a common strategy is for somebody crazy enough to try to build one of these things, once finished, he would give all of your mass extractors, all of your mass storage, all of your energy creating, all of your energy storage to your friends. Just give the buildings to them. You don't need them anymore. Let them fix them if they get broken. You would click on the unit you want to give, and you would click on this little diplomacy button to give it to your teammates. And let them have your old resource creation. You don't need it anymore because you have this. But I highly doubt you'd build one of these in a game unless it's going to be the type of game where you need an unlimited amount of supplies and you have all the time in the world because the enemy's turtling up. So that's the Aeon. Their strengths are in air with their air gunship and their aircraft carrying disc. They've got a sort of a medium grade shield. They've got pretty good artillery. But their real strength lies in their resources. That's because the commander can get 86 mass per second, as well as, if you're crazy enough to do it, an experimental resource generator. I'll go ahead and show you the last. Race here. UEF. Now UEF, as I mentioned, are going to be the defensive race. They are the ones that are going to help you turtle if you decide to turtle. They're going to be the ones building shields in your base. They're going to be the ones building turrets in your base, etc. Let them do their thing. Alright, so we've got our land factory and our air factory up, obviously. We'll go ahead and have these engineers assist it. We're going to go ahead and just go straight to Tier 3, just for the purpose of this tutorial. And we're going to build Tier 3 engineers, per usual. Now, this race isn't much different than any other in the early games. They only have gunships, Tier 2 and Tier 3. They have no Tier 1 gunships as the Cybrans do. They have Tier 1, 2, and 3 point defenses, however. So point defenses, if you remember, are ground targeting defenses. They'll target land-based units but no air units. So that's a Tier 1. There's a Tier 2. And here's a Tier 3. Now the interesting thing about the Tier 3 is you would want to use a combination of Tier 2 and Tier 3 at the end of the game. The Tier 3 have the longest range of any point defense. They're also the fastest firing, as it is a Gatling cannon. And you can see it firing there. And it would be a constant stream if there was an enemy there. It would not stop until that enemy was dead. The Tier 3 point defense of the UEF is the bane of walking bots. Even the high experimentals, such as the Colossus on the previous race, will bow down to a large row of Tech 3 heavy point defense with Tech 2 point defenses in front of them. Very strong. You wanna have shields around it as well, and as I mentioned, as being the defensive race, they have the largest shield. This will cover this entire base with one shield, which is great. They do cost a little bit more to build, obviously, but it's definitely worth it. The other special units that this race has, other than defensive, in experimental specifically, you have what's called the Experimental Mobile Factory, also known as the Fat Boy. And the Fat Boy is a large tank-like structure which actually can be used as a land factory that will produce units of Tier 1, 2, and 3. So if you want to set up a base over here, you could just build a Fat Boy and roll it over here, and bam, you have a base here, or here, or here, or wherever you can roll it to, you have a base there. The Fat Boy has anti-air, it has an air staging facility on the top so it can refuel units. It even has a set of Tier Tech 1 and Tech 2 and 3 turrets on it. It's quite the experimental. A lot of times you'd think that you'd use it to build bases with. You'd roll it over to a place and have an instant base, but you find most often it's actually used either defensively, putting it at the beginning of a column in an area, a bottleneck like this, to thin out or destroy units as they come in with these big turrets, or actually rolling it right into the enemy base is also a decent tactic if you have some air support. See, it's got a nice large shield that surrounds it, and you can actually do quite a bit of damage with its large. These are basically artillery pieces. It's got 6 of them per side, and you'll usually have about 6 of them shooting at once, either the front 2 or the side 2, depending on what side the enemy is. You don't normally see all 12 firing simultaneously, which would be a sight to see. Now, in addition to it, the Fat Boy, which is the most used experimental for this race, this faction, you're also going to see this experimental satellite system, and this is the bane of most people's who are facing UEF. This is a kind of a chump move, and I say that because I've fought a lot of UEF players, and you really don't want to see one of these appear in your base, and I will show that to you here in a second. Here he is building an engineer out of his butt. Boop! And he just pooped out. And I can go ahead and start building base over here. Making a life of my own on this side of the map, you know. Making a family. If I could speed the game up anymore, I would. They don't have the best air units in the game. They do have a pretty spectacular Tier 3 gunship. However, its anti-air component isn't the best. It is definitely worth building late game to destroy the Colossus that might be attacking his base, or Fat Boys are also good targets for the gunships of either Tech 2 or Tech 3. It has the same other Tech 3 and Tech 2 air units as all the other races. It's got an air transport for transporting these little ground guys from here to there. It has gunships that fire from the air to the ground while hovering. It also has air superiority fighters, interceptors, and fighter bombers, which are primarily to attack other air units from the air. This is the experimental satellite. And what it is it's a unit that can't be shot down, can't be hurt. All it does is hover over the enemy base with a very limited view from orbit and attack the living hell out of whatever's underneath it. It doesn't have very high alpha damage. It is a constant beam of annoyance and frustration. And if you build 2 or 3 of these and have them all attack the same shield generator at the same time, it will bring down a shield generator. And then your units are free to go and attack. If you have 2 or 3 of these and you want to destroy the enemy's artillery, you would send them all to destroy the enemy's artillery, and there's nothing the enemy could do about it. The only way to take this satellite down is to go all the way into the enemy's base and take out the building that it came from. This guy. The Novak experimental satellite system. Really is a shitty thing to build if you like having your friends. But you know, if you're really desperate to win, build it and you know, have fun, because they're probably not coming back over to the LAN. So that pretty much does it for the experimentals. They've got a really good ground experimental for the Fat Boy. They've got the experimental satellite. There's also, if you're crazy enough to build it, they do have experimental artillery, which is sort of like a rapid-fire artillery that can shoot across any map of any size. It does take forever to build, though, so keep that in mind. You would want to probably build several of the Tier 3 artillery that we referred to earlier, rather than building the experimental artillery. Or if you already have those artillery up and you have an unlimited amount of resources, because your buddy's an Aeon player who's crazy as well, go ahead and build it. It's not going to hurt, but keep in mind the time it takes. And you can see the time it takes to build something. If you hover over down here at the bottom, on the bottom left under the tooltip, it'll actually tell you the build time. And right now the build time for a nuke, anti-nuke, is 5 minutes. But because I have more than one engineer, I have an unlimited amount of resources, and I'm on plus 10 time, it's going to take a lot less than that. So that pretty much sums it up for that. So this is the defensive race, the UEF, or the most Terran-like race. They've got tanks and they've got basically human. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment box below. I hope I haven't made anybody fall asleep, and hopefully we'll see you at the LAN.